Right, okay. As Heidi says, we write together, we write comic fantasy. One of the reasons why I decided to work on the Birmingham map, the reader's map, is that our first collaborative novel, Clovenhoof, in which Satan loses his job and has to move to Southern Coalfield, is a Birmingham book. We've written that book and the sequel, Pigeon Wings, which came out last year, I think. And we're currently working on books 3 and 4, the first of which might come out later this year. In this book, not set in Birmingham at all, but taking characters from the same stories, Joan of Arc, the Maid of Orleans, in heaven, is sent on a mission down to earth along with some of her saintly friends, St. Francis of Assisi, the lover of animals, and St. Christopher, the patron saint of travel. And for reasons I won't go into right now, they're sent to earth to find Mary, Mother of God, the Virgin Mary, and bring her back to heaven. The novel opens with them being given this mission, and they have to realise they're going to have to go and visit Earth of the 21st century, these 3 medieval or sort of medieval saints. And so to prepare them for that, they have a lecture from St. Thomas Aquinas on what Earth of the current day is like, and I'll read a little bit of that for you. St. Christopher did his best to contain his excitement, fearing that if he let anyone see his joy at escaping the call centre in heaven and treading the good honest earth once more, they'd somehow snatch it away from him. He was so buoyant that he even managed to enjoy much of St. Thomas Aquinas' seminar on what to expect of earth in the 21st century. St. Thomas had brought the 3 saints to one of heaven's many public theatres. This particular one was small, with plush red velvet seats and a screen in front of the stage for showing moving picture shows. Joan had brought with her a blonde-haired woman Christopher did not recognise. Christopher assumed it was a woman, although she appeared to be wearing the dog collar of an Anglican priest, which made no sense at all. "Who is this?" said St. Thomas, wobbling out onto the stage and pointing at the blonde woman. "Evelyn Steed," said Joan. St. Thomas pulled her face and shrugged. "She's my friend," said Joan, "and she's one of the recently deceased." "She's not going with you," said St. Thomas. "But as one of the recently deceased, she might have some insights to offer on this discussion." St. Thomas frowned. "This is not a discussion, mademoiselle, this is a seminar. As in seminary, I'm going to plant the seed of knowledge in your minds. I shall inseminate you, and you will be grateful that I have." The woman Evelyn sniggered and immediately apologised. "I'm sorry, mind in the gutter. Do go on." St. Thomas scowled at her for a moment, and then waved to the projection booth at the back of the theatre. A colourful map of Europe appeared on the screen. "This is Holland," said Thomas. "Mary's last known location." "A war-torn region in my lifetime," said Joan. "The Hooks and the Cods, and then that nasty business with the Burgundians and the Habsburgs. Holland is now ruled by a vast empire known as the European Union, or EU," said Thomas. "Yet not an empire as such," said Evelyn. "An empire," said St. Thomas firmly, "with its capital in Brussels." "And who is their emperor?" asked Joan. "It's hard to tell for certain," said St. Thomas, as a picture of various men and women in tight-fitting suits appeared on the screen. "It might be this Belgian, or this Spaniard. Frankly, it could be any of the people in this picture." "How can people not know?" asked Francis. "Because Europe is a democracy," said Evelyn. "It changes." "Democracy?" said Francis, with a sour look on his face. "Like the ancient Greeks?" "Democracy or not," said St. Thomas, "many regard this Hamburg woman as the de facto Empress of Europe." Joan snorted. "The Germanic people have always had a thirst for power," she said. "That's not true," said Evelyn. A fresh picture appeared on the screen. Evelyn sighed. "Well, yes, Hitler, of course Hitler. You'd have to bring him up, wouldn't you? But not all Germans are like him." "Holland," said St. Thomas. "France and all of Western Europe have been at peace for over half a century," said St. Thomas. "The last war was started by this man." "Ooh," said Joan suddenly. "I know this one. That was the one where all the Jews had to hide in wardrobes, wasn't it?" Evelyn glared at her friend. "I loaned you that book, about possibly the darkest moment in all human history, and that's what you took away from it. I despair." "However," said St. Thomas, "despite the peace, the weapons of war that these countries possess grow ever more powerful." Spears with extra spiky bits, suggested Christopher. Bigger bows, offered Francis. Cannons, said St. Thomas. Guns. Guns? The saints recoiled as a cacophony of noise and violence exploded across the screen. Christopher could not even comprehend what was happening to the helmeted men and the fiery metal amulets in their hands. Francis squealed and covered his ears. Weapons that cause disease, continued St. Thomas. Alchemical poisons, and most terrible of all, explosives of devastating force. The roars and bangs were gone, the screen now displaying scenes of a city, utterly destroyed. You've just segued from The Matrix to the aftermath of Hiroshima, said Evelyn. Is there a problem with that? Said Joe. I couldn't even begin to explain. The great powers of Earth possess enough of these weapons to kill every living thing on the planet, said St. Thomas. Impossible, said Christopher. They must all be sick with worry, said Francis. There's more to worry about than that, said Evelyn. The Earth is heating up. The ice in the far north and south are melting. The sea is rising up and drowning the low-lying regions of the world. What is causing this? Asked Joan. Sin, I'd reckon, said Christopher. St. Thomas nodded. I concur, the unnatural heat of human sinning. No, you great pillock, said Evelyn, is caused by the increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. What's carbon dioxide? Asked Joan. It's a kind of pasta, isn't it? Said Francis. Not a sin, said Christopher. Evelyn got to her feet and turned to address them all. Carbon dioxide is a gas. It's causing the Earth to heat up. The planet is now continually racked by freak weather events, storms, droughts, floods. Are the storms caused by sin? Said Christopher. No. Are you sure? I hear there's lots of nudity on Earth these days. That generally causes people to feel hot and tempestuous. No. So they're all worrying about the floods and the storms and that, said Francis. Well, no, said Evelyn. Most of them are worrying about guarding what little they have. There are over 7 billion people on Earth and not enough resources to satisfy them all. Christopher laughed along with Francis. Now, dear woman, said St. Thomas, we can all tell when you're pulling our legs. 7 billion, that's impossible. Continual population growth, said Evelyn. And yes, that is possibly caused by sin, some of it. But there are natural forces to keep the population in check, said St. Thomas. Disease, plague. Man has medicines to do with most of those, said Evelyn. Bubonic plague is no more. No one's contracted smallpox in decades. So there's no more disease, said Joan. Well, no, we still have some old favourites and a few new ones. Oh, and before even anyone says it, I will beat to a bloody pulp anyone who says they are caused by sin. Wasn't going to say anything, said Christopher hurriedly. If there's any root cause to the suffering and poverty on earth, said Evelyn, it's the inequality between the haves and the have-nots. Fortunately for you, Holland and France are in the technologically advanced and generally safe land of the haves. Ah, yes, said St. Thomas. If you'll take a seat, woman, I was going to say a few words about the advances in engineering and the natural sciences. Christopher tried extraordinarily hard to follow St. Thomas's explanation of the great inventions and leaps in understanding that mankind had made in recent centuries. Laszlo Biro's never-ending writing stick was astounding. The Breville sandwich toaster seemed both an obvious idea and yet simultaneously magical. He got a little lost when St. Thomas talked about the slinky, and an argument erupted when Evelyn contested that the slinky was not invented